Welcome to the Leadership Variations Unfiltered podcast, where each limited run series tackles the leadership problems no one is naming, how women in STEM actually succeed, why leadership fads always fail, and where talent strategy breaks down when the stakes are the highest. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. This is Amy Bladen Shatto, leadership consultant and coach to women in STEM, and your host of the Leadership Variations Unfiltered podcast. In this first limited series, Cracking the Code from Underestimated to Undeniable, we spotlight women leaders in STEM who've risen to senior roles, often without any of the recognition that they deserve. Today's guest is Dr. Biliana Veleva-Rotse. Am I saying that right?
You got it. Yeah, it's
Thank
helpful.
you, okay. PhD, Global Medical Director for Fabry
Disease, yeah.
Fabry Disease at Amicus Therapeutics, a biotechnology company dedicated to developing innovative treatments for rare diseases. That's a mouthful. Since 2016, she has worked in medical affairs, where she translates complex data into meaningful insights that guide therapy development. At Amicus, she leads global medical strategy and evidence generation for Fabry disease, addressing critical unmet patient needs. She is driven by solving complex problems and uniting diverse perspectives to create impactful solutions. Her work has been published in journals, including Journal of Neuroinflammation, Neural Development, Frontiers in Molecular Neuroscience, PLOS Genetics, I hope I got that right,
Yep.
Molecular Genetics and Metabolism, and biomolecules. Billy, as she calls herself, earned her PhD in neuroscience from Oregon Health and Science University and completed postdoctoral training in myelin repair mechanisms. And I'm anxious to hear what that actually is. So, wow, welcome to our show. I am so honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. It's an honor to be here. And I'm really excited to talk to you about my journey and learn from you as well and from your approaches.
Well, thank you for being here. We are so thrilled. So, should we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I always start with the question. So, to get us framed, in coaching senior women in STEM, I've always found that the most powerful parts of someone's leadership are not on their resume. So, I always ask, when you lead today, what's something meaningful that you built or influenced that others may not see from the outside? It's not on your resume.
Yeah, that's a lot in there. I could go in so many directions on that. I think I've been thinking about my leadership approach a lot recently, and one of the things that I am most proud of and that I'm most excited about is my leadership through teamwork. And I know that sounds kind of trite on the surface, but really being with people who have different views, different educational levels, different ethnic backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different specialties they've spent throughout their career, getting those people in a room and building trust with that team really leads to really cool solutions that maybe nobody would have come up with on their own. And most of the time, nobody would have come up with on their own. And I think that the biggest key there is trust and building that individual trust as well as that whole group trust with each other, because then you get those spirited, lively debates that's where the ideas spark from. And that's not on any of my resumes, or there's not a way to really capture that, but that's what brings me life and makes me so excited to be in the position that I'm in.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I find that sometimes people that are so technical and are so skilled like yourself have a little bit of trouble building that trusting technical, getting out of that technical and being able to do the sharing with other people to be innovative. But yet all of the women that I have spoken to on these podcasts have spoken about the importance of being empowered and sharing and growing with other folks. So I'm so interested in hearing how important that's become as a sort of superpower. So that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that and getting us kicked off. I'd love to hear your path into leadership. Was there something about the shift from the really technical and deep expertise into leading, or maybe you're still a player coach, but was this clear for you, or was it something you really had, you're laughing, something you really had to figure out along the way?
Yeah, no, there was absolutely nothing clear about it. I wanted to have my own scientific research lab from for very, very many years. I went into my PhD education thinking that was my goal. In fact, the way I shaped my PhD and postdoc was exactly for that. I became a specialist in genetic molecular mechanisms of neurodevelopment. How do genes interact with each other to make the brain develop? And then for my postdoc, I went into myelin. So neurons are not the only cell type in the brain. Myelin is also really, really important. And I wanted to understand how that regenerates and how the crosstalk happens, thinking that, okay, then I'll have this niche and I'll make my own lab. So I knew I wanted to lead and ask cool research questions, but I did not know that it would look like it does now. Towards the end of my postdoc, it became really clear to me that being a woman in academia was going to take a lot more time than I had planned on. I had a young child and I wanted another one at the time, and it was just not tenable. There was no way that I could see that that was going to happen for my family in a way that I could actually support my family and also be present for them. So I took a big leap and I went into medical affairs at a big pharma company, and they made space for me. They trained me. I already knew some of the disease state that I was working on, so that was really helpful. They trained me how to be a medical science liaison, someone in the field talking to physicians about those technical aspects, about the clinical data, about the disease state. So it's very much being a subject matter expert and bringing in insights from physicians, from nurses, from patients, and figuring out kind of what are the key problems that still need to be solved. About a year and a half later, I was approached by this small company, Amicus Therapeutics, and they wanted me to be an MSL on their team, so a field medical person again. And I jumped at the opportunity to join a smaller group where I could maybe try lots of different things, wear lots of different hats, and kind of be entrepreneurial. And I was really lucky to have this great team to work with. We all had very different expertises and would all just kind of jump in and help each other, learning the disease state, talking to the physicians, building relationships. And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And COVID shut it all down. So all of that in field visiting, going to clinics, talking to physicians, nobody knew what that was going to look like, how it was going to change, for how long. And so we all were forced to sort of pivot, and everything went virtual. And for a time, there wasn't a whole lot happening in terms of the talking to physicians because they were so inundated with dealing with their day to day, what their clinics look like. So at that point, I got an opportunity to work on a global project, kind of again being a subject matter expert, helping think through what genetic variants mean in Fabry disease, how we might interpret them, and kind of setting some of those processes up. And I realized that that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to do kind of global scale things, get to work on the science. And then as COVID kind of wound down a little bit, that global role became more full time for me. And so I became the global medical lead and got to work now not just with the US physicians and medical team, but with everyone across the globe and hear about all the different questions and problems that are needing to be solved, what clinical data are needed, how do we design the trials right. And then through that, I got to interact with lots of different individuals, not just in medical, but also in our clinical research department, clinical operations, marketing, technical operations, manufacturing, everyone all together, and realize that we could solve these really cool problems through having all this different input. So that's kind of where I am today. And I've managed to stay in that global role and work with these teams. And I've started building my own teams across the different functions as well to get all those different perspectives.
Nice. And
That
it
was a
sounds,
long-winded approach to
no,
this
that was
career, but
great.
it was not straightforward.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. I'm so curious because you did take like the S curves to get there. You know, it's interesting when I was first looking at your profile and I was so interested in, I was so glad when you said, yes, you wanted to do this. But I noticed at Amicus, because Amicus really interested me. I went through it was like man, 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 man. And I was so curious what it was like for you getting credibility as a woman in the company. Even though it's a
Yeah.
small company, it still seems to me as an outsider very represented male, not unlike other STEM
Mhm.
companies, very heavily dominated, male dominated. And I was curious as a
Yeah.
woman in your industry and in your company, what was it like for you to have to get credibility as you moved and got this leadership position and built. Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, so maybe looking from the outside, it does look very male heavy, but I often look around the room, the virtual room, as we are now, and I find that the room is full of women and full of different minorities and ethnic backgrounds at the working team level. And increasingly, as we go higher now, too, there's been, I think, in the last few years, a lot more women leaders at Amicus being promoted, brought forward, brought in from outside, and we've gotten little bit more diversity in a lot of those aspects. And that's been intentional. Our group really tries to find that diversity when we're hiring people. So that has shifted a lot. But to your point, historically, as a woman, especially, going back to academia, even, I remember very clearly, okay, I defended my PhD and now I feel like I can say something. And I remember the feedback being, oh, well, no, you're not a professor yet, or you haven't done your postdoc yet, or you haven't published enough yet. So I always had this kind of chip on my shoulder that I'm not ready yet, not smart enough yet. I still have to put in more effort. And I think I brought that in as I came into industry and have always struggled with this thought that I have to be the subject matter expert. I have to know everything. I have to build my credibility before I can say anything. And over the last 7 years that I've been at Amicus, that has really shifted for me. And maybe it's part of my leadership shifting, but also the culture that I'm in. I've felt very taken seriously from day one. And every time I've gotten a new platform, I've felt that I don't have to prove myself in the same way that I used to feel. And so that has been a huge impetus for why I feel like I have gotten to where I've gotten to and have been able to work with the teams I work with. We have this mutual respect and understanding. But going back to that subject matter expertise thing, that's still something I'm struggling with, trying to be an expert on things, but actually then making space for other people to give their input without feeling like I need to come up with an answer, just making that space for others to come up with answers. So I don't know if that answered your question exactly about women in the room, but I feel like we have a lot of women in the room and we're all kind of maturing our leadership approaches together.
That's helpful. Yeah, and it does. But I am curious about this last thing you said about feeling from a technical perspective and being so incredibly talented in that space, moving into a real leadership area, always feeling like people are looking to you for the answer. And yet at the same time, you said right when we started this interview that sparking the creativity comes from everybody contributing. So, and I have trouble believing that right off of the bat, day one, they just respected you. I think it was something about your leadership style and the fact that you have something, there's something about you that's inclusive, that brought that inclusive. I mean, you value it and you brought that to it. So I am curious to know. I mean, there's a balance for you because
Yeah.
you had to, there must have been a shift for you, or there must be a way that you balance. How do you balance at this point? I'm sure, well, I don't want to say I'm sure. Do you feel like you have to speak last in the room, or do you feel like you have, what's your process for making sure that
Mm.
people feel like they're able to contribute and yet you can still be a part of that process?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that balance between a subject matter expert and a leader. And that's something I'm still very much fleshing out. And I think to your point about the early days, when I came into the team, I was very clear about, I was a field medical person. I was very clear about what my expertise was and what it wasn't. And we had this really well balanced team in terms of experience and educational levels and regions. Everything was, we all really had that trust in each other and we all knew where we each provided value. So I kind of leaned into this is where I'm strong. This is where I know I can answer these questions. But hey, I'm not afraid to ask this person over here to help me out when I don't know something about a system. And I think that from day one kind of started building that trust throughout that team, but also then the organization. And then as I've changed roles throughout, I make sure that I keep that. So I know where I provide value. I know for sure when I can answer a question or know how to answer a question or find the resources for it. And I also know when I'm out of my depth. And so finding that kind of space for each person in the team where they're the expert, I think is step one, because it makes it clear that you're not trying to be the expert in everything, but also allows me to contribute in my subject matter expertise and then make space for others to contribute. And actually, some of the coolest solutions we've had have been, for example, we had someone from regulatory come up with a way that we could extend a study at almost cost neutral and get more data. And that's not something that's part of her role at all. But it was because we had that trust and we were just kind of spitballing ideas one on one and then brought it to the team. And the people whose expertise that was were like, oh, of course that's the solution. That makes perfect sense. This is how we're going to do it. So it's that kind of, I know what I know and I know what I don't know, but also, hey, I have a crazy idea. What do you think?
Right. Right. Thank you for that. That's fascinating. And it makes a lot of sense because it feels like you want to create that open atmosphere where you can still be a part of it, but it's still inclusive of everybody else. And that's what good leadership is. That's, when I'm coaching
It's so fun.
the women that are coming to me, a lot of times I get folks that feel like somehow if they are leading and they're including others, they're losing something or they feel like something's going away. And that's not the case, clearly, with your leadership style. So it's interesting.
I've been thinking about this whole theme for the last few weeks since you asked me to join your podcast. But I actually realized that it's impacted my life too. So my personal life, I have two young daughters and I want them to be strong and loved and happy and kind. And I realized that over the last few years, since I've thought more about leadership and been more intentional in it, I've actually taken that into my parenting and think about what they each contribute and just meet them where they are without having all the answers. Because I remember as a kid, my parents being like, well, I know better because I did this and I did that. And I was thinking of, how would you know? You don't live in this world. It's totally different. And I think just setting that level of trust where they feel like they can really be open and I'm not going to judge them has very positively influenced my family life as well.
So that's right there. You just described what a great leader is. That's fascinating and a wonderful metaphor for good, inclusive leadership. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for making me think about it.
That was awesome. So I am curious, looking back across your whole career and all of the wonderful things you've done, was there a particular challenge or a moment that shifted something that was different for you, something that was an aha experience that maybe in hindsight created a catalyzing moment for you, but something that was hard, even maybe it didn't go as well as you wished that it would?
Yeah, there have been a few moments of that. Again, a lot of the challenges that were most kind of difficult to process emotionally happened during my academic days. I think, I was a lot younger then and my brain was still finishing its full formation and all those experiences are very new. And I was very attached to the idea that I was going to have my own lab. When it became clear that it just was unlikely to work out that way for numerous reasons. And I also had a pretty difficult relationship with one of my mentors. I was at this crossroads where I suddenly felt like my life had fallen apart and I didn't know what value I could bring to the world because I wanted this lab. This was going to be my thing. I was going to answer questions, help solve genetic diseases, especially during neurodevelopment, young kids that are facing these scary things. And I was going to find answers. And I thought that was it. It was over. And I didn't know what my backup plan was. And so I had to really go back to the drawing board, figure out what I valued, what I was good at, what I enjoyed doing on a very granular level, and then find what kind of career path might offer that. And so I really just had to start over out of nowhere. And I came into this medical science liaison, medical affairs path that I had no idea existed before that happened. So it was a really negative experience in the moment. But once I found the answer, because of that introspection, because of that looking within and without, it made it very clear to me where I could contribute and where I could bring value. And then to that point, once I discovered global medical and development and research and development in industry, it was another moment where I realized, oh, maybe I can do even more. Maybe I can still develop those medicines, do it on a bigger scale, and find those resources, but I don't have to do it myself. I just bring the people together to make those creations. And so it's been really rewarding looking back at it through a different lens.
That's incredible. And it's a big arc that you've gone through. And I can see why that's, when you look back and you say that was a really kind of a catalyzing moment for you. It's so funny because you describe a very confident young woman. And even though you're saying it was kind of maybe a little bit of a negative experience, when I was in grad school getting my PhD, I was 100% sure I was never going to finish. That like it was
Oh, yeah.
true imposter syndrome. I don't have what
Yeah.
it takes. I looked everywhere behind, like, I can't do this. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to finish this. But so never mind wanting to solve the world's problems. I was worried that there was no way I was ever even going to get through this program. They were going to figure me out. So I look at you and I think, you had these incredible goals. And even though maybe they were a little bit unrealistic at the time, it's so incredible that you had that stamina and that confidence and just really, really incredibly forward thinking and mature for the time. And they did change into something that was a lot more realistic, but incredibly confident. So I do want to see that. It's wildly confident. And then I look at your resume and what you've done, and it's like you solved some world's problems, and you're well on your way to doing more.
Oh, I hope so. But I was talking to my mom about this over the weekend, and she told me, she's like, "Oh, I've always known you were going to be a leader." And it kind of rubs me the wrong way in some ways, because I don't want to be a leader to be a leader, just to be a leader. However, I think what she was touching on, and then I explained this back to her and she agreed with me, is that I've always had a vision for how I want the world to be. And if there's someone else who has that vision and a strategy to approach it, I will follow them. I am more than happy to just get on board. But I haven't necessarily always found that. And I found it in lots of aspects. One of the reasons I've been an Amicus for so long is I believe what we're trying to achieve. But sometimes when there's that vision that's just, it wakes me up in the morning and I feel like I have to do something. And I look around and that's my vision. So I have to do something. And so if I can get people to agree that that's an important vision and an important goal, then that's the point. It's not so much that I want to be the one leading them. I would actually very happily follow along. But I have a vision. I believe that we can make the world a better place if we build for it now. And I believe that by giving people the data that they need to empower themselves, then we can make the world a better place through everyone kind of lifting up their own power. That sounds really cheesy.
No, it doesn't.
Say it out loud.
But it circles right back to where you started, which was the relationships and working together. And that is leadership, because you can't be a leader if you don't have the right followership. So sometimes that means having the ideas that other people get on board with. And sometimes it means knowing enough to say, hey, I'm on board with this idea. But that's what leadership is. That's amazing.
Yeah, I actually love taking turns with, like, all the people that I work with on my teams. Yes, I lead them on some things, but they lead on other things. And I love that so much. It's my favorite way to work.
That's amazing. Well, I'm looking at our time, and this went so quickly, I can't believe it. But
I could talk to you all day.
I always close with the same thing. So I close with something I call the undeniable take. So what is one truth that you would give to the woman who's ready to lead in a senior role, but she's still being underestimated? So in other words, she knows she's got it, but needs help cracking the code, like you very clearly have.
Oh, wow. One thing. I think that being open to be vulnerable, and it's scary because sometimes you get hurt and sometimes people can take advantage of that. But knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know, and being very open about it enhances your credibility so much more than blustering and only speaking when you know something.
I love it. And there we have it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Biliana.
I really appreciated taking the time with you. Just having the time to think through this has helped me crystallize my approach to some problems. And so I really appreciate it. You've helped me.
Oh my goodness.
In some problems that I was facing.
I'm so honored to have had you, and look forward to staying in touch and hearing about all the amazing things that you're doing as a leader. So
Thank you, Amy.
we will close it down.
Okay.
Thanks for joining. For more unfiltered advice and tools that drive real business value, subscribe to our newsletter, connect on LinkedIn, or book a consult, because leadership development fails when we solve the wrong problems. Find all links below.